In the last video, we talked about how to interpret the slope of the least squares regression line. In this video, we'll talk about how to interpret the y-intercept, or sometimes some books will just call it the intercept. So remember, for the least squares regression line, we calculated that a couple of videos ago to be y hat equals 0.099x plus 160.194. When we talk about the y-intercept, that's going to be our b. So in this case, that's going to be 160.194. That's what we would like to talk about in this video. So the thing about the y-intercept is, if you think about what it looks like graphically, it means it's where it crosses the y-axis. So if I was to graph this line, perhaps it looks something like this. It doesn't really matter for this explanation. When we talk about the y-intercept, it's where it crosses the y-axis. So I would be talking about this point right here, or perhaps let me highlight it. We're talking about this point right here. So when we think about the y-intercept, it's sometimes helpful to think about it as an ordered pair. So I know an ordered pair is going to be x comma y. And that y value that we found is that b, that 160.194. So the y value is 160.194. So if I can figure out what the x is and then look back at my data set, well, I know that my x value represents home size and y value represents the selling price. I can then use that information to help me construct an interpretation using my variables. So I just need to figure out what x is. So what's convenient is x is actually the same thing for every single y-intercept. So let's think about what x could be. I want to think about the x value of this point right here in particular. Well, could x be negative? That would mean that x lives over here. If you think about your x-axis, which is right here, this is your x-axis, your negative x values live somewhere over here. They're to the left of the y-axis. So x can't be negative because it's not to the left of the y-axis, it's on the y-axis. Similarly, x can't be positive because then it would live to the right of the y-axis. That's where our positive x values live. So it can't be negative, it can't be positive. Well, there's only one number that is neither negative nor positive. Is in fact, my favorite number is 0. X is always going to be 0 when we talk about the y-intercept. So it's always going to be 0 comma b, whatever that y-intercept is. So this is extremely helpful because now I know here's the home size, so here's the size of the home, and then here's the price. And I can use that to help me construct an interpretation. So if I wanted to talk about this now, so this says, and let me just copy this down here real quick so that we have a little bit more room. If I want to talk about this now, I can say, okay, well, for a home size of 0 square feet, and I'm going to stop right there. It probably does not make sense to talk about a home size of 0 square feet. This is something that will happen surprisingly often when we talk about the intercept. It actually doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to talk about it. So much so that some questions will ask, hey, interpret the y-intercept or explain why it doesn't make sense to. In this case, it doesn't really make sense to because you wouldn't have a home that has 0 square feet. So this is saying if I have a home with 0 square feet, it costs $160.194,000. Well, that seems kind of silly to say out loud because every home, if I'm buying a home, it should hopefully have some size. Otherwise, I have no home. So in this case, it doesn't make sense to talk about this. So I would just write out that interpretation saying, okay, it does not make sense to talk about it, does not make sense to interpret. Then we might say home size must be positive or can't be 0, something like that. there's a lot of different ways you can phrase that there. It must be positive, must be greater than 0, something along those lines here. So that's how we would interpret that, and oftentimes if it's not appropriate to interpret the y-intercept, it will kind of naturally come up. You'll say, okay, 0 square feet cost me $160,000. That doesn't seem reasonable. That seems like kind of a silly statement to make. And if that comes through your head as, boy, that doesn't make any sense, or that seems silly, then you know that it's not appropriate to talk about it. And then you can explain why. And essentially it's just, hey, why doesn't it make sense? Why did you think that that was kind of a silly thing to say?